Methodologies webinar. This is Yvette Kelly with the Managed Care Technical Assistance Center, and today will be the first of two webinars focused on the review of both the SPA and HCBS draft rates. Today's presentation will detail the methodology used to determine the rates, with a follow-up webinar scheduled on October 24th to review the actual rates. And registration information for this event will be forthcoming. Before we get started, I want to just take a few moments to review some of the housekeeping and logistics for today's presentation. Please note that upon joining the webinar, you've been placed on mute to avoid any background noises that may distract others from listening to the webinar. If you come across any technical issues during today's event, please chat to the host, who should be able to assist you. You will have the opportunity to submit questions for the Q&A portion of today's presentation by utilizing the chat box feature, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. If it's not visible, please click the dialog bubble on the top right toolbar and it should appear. In order to ensure that we're able to answer as many questions as time permits, we're requesting that you send in your questions at any point during the presentation, and we will address them at the end during the Q&A portion. Slides and a recording of this webinar will be posted on ctacny.org, usually within 2 to 3 days of the event, so you'll have an opportunity to look back if you desire to do that. And always, just a friendly reminder that information and timelines presented are current as of today. And so again, today, I'd like to welcome you to the SPA and HCBS draft rates webinar. Today we're going to be joined by Donna Cater, who's the Deputy Director of the Division of Finance and Rate Setting from the New York State Department of Health, who will provide an overview of the key components of their review and analysis. And as well, we're also joined by a number of other partners from OMH. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Donna to get us started.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to lay out a high-level overview of how we are calculating the rates for the children's 1915C transition to the 1115. There are 6 waivers transitioning from this 1915C status into the 1115. So as you can imagine, there are many things to take into consideration when you are setting the rates for these. The first one is, so the overview is to support the fee-for-service rate set analysis and development for consolidation of the historical 1915C waivers into one 1115. We worked collaboratively to collect the data, information, and considerations that will impact the final fee-for-service rate and the rate code level for the HCBS services. Key components to doing this, and if any of you have been on WebExes with me before or in meetings with me before, you'll know that I don't follow these words on the paper very well. I just speak from what I know. But this gives you what I'm going to say. So the engagement team members across OMH, OPWDD, OCFS to collect information. So we meet on a probably twice a week with all of our state partners, Department of Health and obviously OMH, OPWDD, OCFS, to collect information that we think is going to be pertinent to setting these rates. Some of the considerations that we have to take into account are the differences between the 1115 and the 1915Cs that you're operating right now. And the differences in those 1115 services, we've been working on those things for quite some time, and you've seen some crosswalks. I know there's been other conversations about the differences in the population. You all have different populations that you're serving. There's a different number of individuals being served, kids being served across all of your programs. There are always special areas that need consideration depending on whether you are a provider from OCFS, OPWDD, and OMH. Everyone seems to have their own their own special needs as far as where they're most interested, where their services are the most important to service delivery and to your individual. So we need to take all of those things into consideration. The data that's collected from the state is the historical service utilization and paid claims. We do that by gathering in the aggregate all of the rate codes that have been billed for an annual, all of the dollars billed against those rate codes on an annual basis. So that we look at, I think we pulled 2 years worth of data. We formulate workbooks. I know you're all very familiar with workbooks. We formulate these workbooks with the historic 1915C information, and then we work on those workbooks to roll it into an 1115 and how it might look once it's in the 1115. Rate development workbooks, historic development. So one of the things, this is the OPWDD comprehensive waiver. We know that is not rolling into this waiver, but CMS asks us a lot of questions about what the programs cost. In the children's waiver currently under the 1915C, we don't have cost data. We have what is currently being billed, but we don't have cost data. So we looked at OPWDD's comprehensive waiver because they have a vast amount of cost data. That waiver just went through CMS approval, and we just changed all of their methodologies to a cost-based methodology. So it at least gives us a point of reference. It does not mean that we're going to take OPWDD's comprehensive waiver and just say, oh, those are the rates. Not at all, but it does give us a point of reference, and it gives us something to point to for CMS purposes. We have to look at all of the amendments to old 1915C waiver applications. We know that many of you under the 1915C waivers just had your waivers approved by CMS. And in those waivers, there were different billing units, locations, the service will be delivered. The one that stands out in my mind is the respite, whether it's freestanding respite or whether it's at-home respite. Everyone's respite, it seems to be very different across all of the programs. So that's one of the places that we're spending a lot of time and energy to make sure that we get that service right, because we know it's very important service to families and to their individuals, their family members, their children. We also are going to crosswalk the rate codes. I know that I've heard a lot of feedback. I haven't gotten any myself, but I've heard a lot of feedback that the rate codes are a big issue. In OMH's world, the rate codes the rates just changed, and we added some rate codes, and we changed some rate codes and some billing units in OMH's current 1915C waiver. So changing them in July again in less than a year does cause some providers some agita to being able to change their billing systems again. So we want to take that into account as we do this, and we want to do this very skillfully so as to not disrupt the current delivery of service and to have a smooth transition to the 1115. Other relevant data that we use are fee schedules. Some of the rates out there are not rates per se. Rates, when I think of rates, are provider-specific rates that are calculated using a methodology across the whole service. There are some fee schedules that blend all of the providers. Some of them are regional, some of them are just a standard fee schedule. So we've pulled all of those in to see how those fit within our system as well. Information and data needed to analyze the potential impacts, such as minimum wage. We know minimum wage has a big effect on many of our direct care workers. So we want to make sure that we're taking those things into consideration. As we move forward into July, we'll have had 2 phases of minimum wage, and we need to make sure that our information reflects that. Again, wage in geographic places, New York regions and education levels from sources such as the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and from CMS. So the analysis, after we've collected all of that data, which we have done, obviously, because we are coming out with rates very shortly, draft rates, mind you, because CMS still gets to weigh in on the rates themselves. So we analyze this data. We review the 1915C to determine how it's going to line up with the 1115 requirements. One of the biggest things when we're doing this is the unit of service. Because you're talking about 3 distinct state partners, OCFS, OMH, OPWDD, and the Department of Health, there's actually 4 of us. Those 4 distinct partners have done the services very different along the way, and the things that CMS has approved may be different as far as the unit of service across all of those programs. So we need to take that into account as we're doing this. I know one of the big things that I was responsible for in OPWDD's world was that they had their SEMP service, and it was a monthly unit of service, and it had to go down to an hourly. That becomes very, very difficult for providers and for people receiving the service. So we want to make sure that we line all of these things up properly. Obviously, we conduct a review of the materials and the workbooks of all of the historical data collected, review the data by service to determine what could be relied upon based on the volume and appropriateness to determine its credibility. So some of the things we look at who's using the service, the utilization of the service, who's using the service the most, and how does it line up with the rest of the services that are being provided. And I'll just give you an example. If OCFS uses, let's say they use freestanding respite, and this is just an example, not to confuse anyone. If they're the only ones using freestanding respite, and then you have maybe OMH that used freestanding respite very, very minimally, we would be looking at OCFS's usage and OCFS's rates, and maybe we would be putting more weight onto theirs rather than on to OMH's. And when I say weight, it's because we do a weighted comparison actually by utilization between the services. So the next one is the rate alignment and adjustment. We compare the services definitions. We've spent a lot of time with our state partners and comparing the current service definitions and what the 1115 service definitions are, so that we know, are they changing? Is there going to be something different? And we know in a lot of cases there are. Some things are the qualifications of the staff providing those services. Some things are just under 1115. It is just very different than it is under 1915C. So we review all of the definitions and the staff qualifications. The next one is reviewing, where available, review the cost data. And as I spoke about earlier, there has not been historically any cost data available to us under these 1915C waivers. So we've had to rely on the cost data from OPWDD's comprehensive waiver. They do have respite services, and because they do have so many services there that do match up to where we are headed in this 1115, that we are using some of that information to inform us, not to set the rate, but just to inform our analysis. The next one is leverage effective rates for certain services. We need to trend them forward after we've come up with what we believe. We need to trend them forward for things that are coming in the future. And one of those things I know you all know about is the Be Fair to Direct Care, which in some instances means that direct care workers and clinical workers are getting an increase. I know that those increases need to be taken into account as we're doing this very strategically. And when I say that, what I mean is that we could really just say, oh, these are the rates, but we really don't want to disrupt. I know that it's all about the delivery of service to the individuals, but we want to make sure that we don't disrupt any service delivery, because we know these services are so important to the children that we serve, that we want to make sure that we're doing this in a thoughtful way, if you will, because we know it's going to be a difficult transition. To begin with, we don't want to make it more difficult with rate confusion. Estimated future service payment review. So one of the biggest things is that you compare historical payments under a 1915C to the potential 1115 payments that we're coming up with. And we need to take into account that some of the things are different. So we can do budget neutrality, but until it starts, we're really just sort of guessing where we're going to be. One of the things that stands out all the time to me is that there are slot limits in your 1915Cs. Those slot limits don't exist under an 1115. So I have to take into account that may cause some topsy-turvy or tipping of my budget neutrality calculation. So, and I don't want to take into account and say, oh, anticipate that there'll be 100,000 new slots coming on, and then we only get 1,000, because then my budget neutrality tips the opposite way. So we need to really take that into account as we're doing that, doing this. And some of that all gets flushed out as we talk to our state partners in how they see their own particular areas growing based on the slots. So that's where we get our information. We aren't just in this ourselves. Our state partners are giving us a lot of this information. Then we'll do a comparison to see and understand the potential movement of those payments, and what services will those potential new services show up in, because obviously those new slots aren't going to show up in every single service under this new 1115 or under the new 6 state plan services. So we need to review where we think those new slots, what services those new slots will be accessing. So then we have next steps. And obviously the next steps are, and I know that there's many people out there that they want to say, well, just show us the rates. And then I know that's where everybody gets on these rate calls and says, just show us the rates. But we need to finalize the rates. And the rates themselves will be shared in draft form. And I say in draft because, again, CMS has the final call, and so does the Division of Budget on these rates for approval. So the final rates, the next webinar will be on 10/24. I think it's at 11 in the morning next time. And we'll actually be sharing rates, and we'll be sharing some things, some assumptions that we've built into some of the rates and how we came up with the exact rates. Obviously, it's not going to be A plus B divided by C, where it's going to give you the exact rate. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm saying we're going to give you the analysis of how we got to where we're going. But we will share the rates on the 24th. We will work with our other state partners to finalize the outstanding internal questions that we have. We will take your feedback. By all means, I am a big proponent of send me your feedback and we'll take it into consideration, and because you are the boots on the ground out there and you're the ones who actually are going to implement this, and you may see pitfalls that I don't see as we're combining these things. So I am very much a proponent of getting feedback from you so that we can set these, as I said before, thoughtfully. We're going to share on 1010, we're going to share our rates with our state partners and get their feedback on these things, because right now they have not seen the rates that we're coming up with at this point. We're going to make any final adjustments based on your feedback or based on their feedback, and based on any questions that you send me today, we may be making some adjustments to what we have as well. And then after we make the final adjustments, we would again review them with all of our state partners and communicate the rates to you on the 24th. Well, again, on the 24th, take feedback from you as to is it what you thought it was going to be? Is it not what you thought it was going to be? Those type of questions. The one thing I do want to remind you is that there are 6 other waivers all transitioning into this. Actually, there's 7. I was right the first time. There is 1 OPWDD. There are 2 Department of Health Care at Home waivers. There are 3 OCFS B2H waivers, and there is 1 OMH SED waiver. So there are 7 coming into this, all into one rate structure. So as you send your feedback, please be cognizant that there are other partners, and I'm not ignoring your feedback if it doesn't change things. It's just that it just doesn't fit into what we're doing. So please send your feedback. That's really important to me. And CMS constantly asks me, how many times did you have stakeholder engagement? So I want to be sure that you all have the information and that you do give me feedback. So those would be our next steps. And now, and then the rest of the next steps are respond to the questions, as I just said, and we will respond to some questions today as time permits, and set the final rates. And then we need to submit the rates to Division of Budget and CMS, and so that they are aware of where we're headed and what the fiscal implications can be. And then we have to obviously respond to any CMS and DOB questions of how we built up to the rates that we are presenting. So with that, I don't know if I want to, Yvette, if you want to take it back and finish the slides and then do questions, or if you'd rather do questions and then your slides.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thanks for that detailed overview that you gave. I'm just going to take a moment here, and we're going to pause for a second just to really kind of review some of the upcoming offerings, and then we'll have time for some Q&A afterwards. But I just want to share with you some information related to our upcoming offerings. As mentioned at the top of this webinar, we will be holding a part 2 to this webinar, and Don again just reiterated that. And so registration information will be forthcoming, and you should see that within a day or two, announcement for that, so you can register. Also want to be mindful that we are hosting some in-person MCO contracting fairs in November. We will be hosting them in Albany, New York City, and Rochester. And again, information related to all of these things will be forthcoming. Again, we want to just let folks know because this information is going to be coming out rapidly, and so we want you to be able to be planful about being able to attend some of these. And then in December, we were going to follow that up with the revenue cycle management training that is going to be scheduled in Rochester, Albany, and New York City. So there's a lot of things that are upcoming. And again, just want to make sure that you guys have this on your radar and to be looking for it. It will information will be flowing very rapidly. And so now I want to move to the Q&A period. We do have several questions that have come in, and so just a reminder that you're still able to submit some of your questions. We do have a few minutes for these, and so Don, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of ask you some of the questions that we received, and you can just, respond as you can. So the first question is related to some of the workbooks that you discussed on slide 6. The question is, will these workbooks be shared with MCOs?
So that's a very good question. I have Deloitte here with me, Amanda's here with me, and they are helping us with these workbooks. And in the past, I believe we haven't shared them in the past. In the past, they have not been shared. So maybe pieces of the workbook could be shared, but I don't know how much of the workbook. So I will take that question back to John Olberg, who is my boss, and ask him if he wants to share them this time or not.
Okay, thank you. Another question that we have is around the cost detail that is available on the CFRs for OMH and SSOP and for OCFS services. The question is, was this data reviewed to inform the rates in your methodology that you discussed?
So, to my knowledge, B2H, the OCFS, has cost report data, but it is not in a comprehensive manner that we were able to review it. I believe SEDs, and I don't believe the SED was reviewed. If that cost report data is available, I would be more than happy to review it, but I will have to check with my OMH state partners to find out if it is. It was my understanding that not in these services it was not available. So those two pieces, definitely not in B2H, but I'll have to check on the SED one.
Okay, thank you. And Jen, we're getting a little bit of feedback, so I don't know if that's on your end, but I just wanted to let you know that, so it may not have been completely clear, but again, we'll provide these questions, and you can take a look and review, and folks, if they have any additional questions, can submit. Another question is, can more information be shared on the methodology of the future utilization of the 1115 services moving from the 1915C as it relates to future service payment review?
Right, so I believe what that question is asking me is to share my assumptions of what the new utilization will look like under 1115, and that will be part of the WebEx on the 24th.
Great, thank you. Is there a draft billing manual out for the children's implementation?
There is not one out yet. This is one of my favorite questions because I head up a group with the billing manual group, and they are a smart bunch of people, let me tell you, because I look at what they're doing and it's all Greek to me, but they are working on one. OMH, OPWDD, and OCFS, they are on this group together, and they are working on a billing manual, rate codes, locator codes, all of those things on how you will bill under the 1115. That will be forthcoming, but it is not complete at this point.
Okay. Another question is, does the state have an anticipated date to submit the draft rates to CMS?
I don't know, actually. That's a very good question. We said, CMS said by the end of the year that they needed them. But after the 24th, it's really about, the real question is, that's going to be the date that you guys all see them. After we review the feedback that you've given it to us, we assume by the end of November we should be ready to submit to CMS the draft rates. So we absolutely have to by the end of the year, but maybe by the end of November we'll be in a good place to be able to submit those based on the feedback, which is why we're doing these WebExes now.
Perfect. Thank you. Communication of the rates will be at the on the next webinar, but it says in addition, will you be sharing the rate codes the billers should use when billing Medicaid managed care plans? Again, my favorite question. I like these rate code questions because that group is really working hard on this. I'm not sure if on the 24th we're going to have it all nailed down. We will have our path on the 24th. And that we would be willing to share the path. I'm not sure that the rate codes themselves will be available, but will be I could schedule another WebEx if people are interested in. We could schedule another WebEx as a third one to say, okay, here's where we've landed on the rate codes and the billing stuff, and I can have that very smart subgroup presenting to you to let you know how it's all going to work because, like I said, it is a very large undertaking and we don't want to just slap it together, if you will. So we can talk about internally about another WebEx after the 24th, maybe 2 weeks after that, to nail down all of the rate codes and billing procedures if that subgroup is ready by then. So I will put that on my list. Okay. And there's a couple questions regarding the rates, but I think I'm going to reserve those questions because you will probably cover them on the 1024 webinar. But there is questions around communications and who folks should reach out to. So is there a single point of contact for all these changes at DOH, or should they just be directed to each state agency? I honestly, Alyssa, are you able to speak on that? Because I can't. I don't know where the questions from this, they go to this website right here, and they will send the question to the state partners or to me if they are rate questions. If you're asking where other questions go, I don't have that information. I mean, I don't know if Caitlin is on, if Caitlin could speak to that. I'm not sure. And just from MCTAC, I'm sorry, Donna. I was just going to say, if folks have questions as well, they could submit to mctacinfo@nyu.edu, and we could also review the question and make sure they get to the appropriate agency. So just a few more questions that have come in. It says, can you provide comment on any anticipated unit service frequency capitations and options for clients who require higher levels of service provision if you do expect service limits to be implemented? I think that's a question that we're going to have to take back. That's a pretty involved question. Is that okay? Eva? Yes, that's perfectly fine. Lots of involved questions. Yep. Few more. Is the release of the billing guidance that you spoke about dependent upon CMS approval of the draft rates? So I think you answered that question in terms of when you're going to be submitting. So they're asking, is that dependent on? Okay. Yeah. So okay. I don't think that. Let me rephrase that. So I don't think the billing guidance is dependent on them approving the rates because, frankly, they're just approving the rates. They're not approving how we bill the rates. So the billing guidance can come out without CMS approval. It's just a matter of when it's going to be completed. Okay. And another question around that, can we expect to continue using the current rates until the new codes and rates are approved? Yes. So we are transitioning, I believe, in July 1st. So between now and July 1st, nothing changes. Everything is the same rate codes, the same rates, the same requirements. All of those things are in place. I know there's a health home thing out there in April, and I can't speak to that because I always tell Lana and others that I try not to get mixed up in the program side of the world because it only confuses me and puts more on my plate. But from now until July, you should be billing those rates and rate codes with the exception of that transitioning health home piece. Okay. what level of cost for overhead is included in rate calculations due to additional billing and admin staff need?
So that's something for the 24th when we tell you what assumptions are in those rates.
Great. Again, there's a number of questions here that are more specific to rate questions, which I think, Donna, you will address in some of in the future webinars, so I'm just going to reserve those right now. But here, a question is around plans. It's my understanding that plans will be at risk for these services initially. If their understanding is correct, could you provide a timeline for when plans will be at risk for these services? I'm not really sure if that's a question that you can answer today.
Not a question I can answer today.
Okay. All right, and we're just going to do a few more questions. This is around OPWDD rates, and the question is, as you align them, will the community habilitation, will those rates be changing?
Can you just say that one again?
Yeah, the question is, will the community habilitation on the OPWDD side, will the rates be changing?
That's another question for the 24th.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, and I think we've taken a good majority of the questions that I think you can answer today. Again, we're going to have another webinar following this on the 24th that will go in more detail about the rates, and some of these questions will be answered there. So at this time, I think we'll close the webinar. And again, if folks have questions that they'd like to submit, they could definitely submit them to MCTAC@nyu.edu, and we will make sure to address them. And as a reminder, we will be sending out information for you folks to register for the 24th, the webinar on the 24th, so please look out for that, as well as some of the other upcoming trainings that were discussed. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I want you to enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.